2024 conference hosted by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, the ECPR and the CIRC. So today we're going to discuss the horrendous crime of online child sexual exploitation and the use of digital technology to exploit children for sexual exploitation or other forms of abuse. I'm here accompanied by my dear colleagues and friends from different organizations. So we're having here Ana Lucila from the University of Madrid. We're having here Madalena and her colleague Edgar from ICMPD. And we're having here also Zoe from ICMEC. I'm going to present them in more detail before they speak, but I just wanted to let you know that we have here a distinguished panel of experts on human trafficking, tech-facilitated human trafficking, and the use of technology to exploit children. Before we start going into the roundtable discussion, so that means today we're going to have brief presentations, but we want to have like a vivid discussion. And after these presentations, we're also going to have the opportunity for you, our participants, to also pose questions. So if you want to put any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box at any point. Also afterwards at the Q&A session, you can raise your hand and you can pose your question to one of the presenters. But before we go into the presentations of our experts, we wanted to also, or I wanted to also frame the discussion in terms of like, what is tech-facilitated human trafficking? What is the role of technology when we're talking about the exploitation of children? And nowadays, it's not that easy to say the exploitation of children is happening online or offline. This is something that has become very much blurred lines. But basically, when we're talking about tech-facilitated or cyber-enabled child sexual exploitation or abuse, we are talking about different technologies, and we are also talking about different terminologies. And this is very important that all describe different forms of sexual exploitation of children. For instance, the grooming for the purpose of sexual exploitation, the sextortion, the production of abusive child material. What is very important for us is that we don't use the terminology of child pornography. Also, my colleagues will go into the detail of that. And technology and language, not technology, but language is important here as we're talking about exploitation of children where no consent has been given. So when we talk about this topic and we want to put this in numbers, we're talking about 750,000 predators worldwide being online at any given time. We're talking about 45 million child sexual exploitation images and videos online, for instance, in the year 2018. We're talking about the reports of child sexual exploitation quadrupled globally from 1 million, for instance, in 2019 to over 4 million in 2020. These are numbers from the European Commission, but also from other organizations, one of them ICMEC. So when we're taking a step back in terms of what is technology here playing for a role. So we're talking about in general about technological advancements that they have not only transcended like the global economy, but they have, of course, also transformed the criminal activities, illicit markets, crime landscapes, and including that, of course, in the context also the human trafficking landscape. So technology makes it much more easier and convenient for criminals to approach their potential victims, and especially children. So the expansion in the internet, and of course, for instance, smartphones, social media, coupled with the early exposure to these devices, they have contributed to this alarming increase at which children and child sexual abuse and exploitative material have been reported. And what is also quite alarming is that child sexual abuse material has increasingly depicting younger children in recent years. So according to the Internet Watch Foundation in 2021, there have been 27,000 reports showing the abuse of children between 7 and 10 years old, and making it a 235 increase compared to that of 8,000 reports in 2020. So we can see that all our trends, and unfortunately data is very scarce in countries and globally, but we can see that basically the trends are going up in every country and around the world. And of course, we know also that the pandemic had a huge also element of increasing that. So that means also the earlier exposure and the longer duration of staying online, specifically during the pandemic, of younger children, has made and is making them extremely vulnerable. So, and especially for criminals trying to manipulate children into record also their own sexual abuse on camera. There is a lot more to say, but I'm going to stop here at the moment. And we're going to start with the first presentation of my dear colleague, Ana Lucila. And so Ana Lucila, I'm going to briefly present you about her background. Ana Lucila Sandoval Orozco received the degree in computer science engineering from the Universidad Autónoma del Caribe in Colombia in 2001, and her master's degree in research in computer science, and her PhD degree in computer science from the Universidad Complutense in Madrid. She's currently a senior researcher and a member of the group of analysis, security, and systems of the University in Madrid. She's also a visiting professor with the Network Engineering Laboratory and Electrical Engineering Department of the University of Brasilia in Brazil. She has been advisor of 7 PhD theses in the last 5 years, and her professional experience includes her participation in both national and international research projects and both public and private financing. Regarding her scientific activity, she has published numerous publications in prestigious international conferences, and her main interest in research is computer networks and their applications. She's also an editor or guest editor of international journals, such as the Applied Sciences, Entropy, IEE Access, and International Journal of Distributed Sensor Networks. Muchas gracias, Ana Lucila. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Vivian. Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen. Hello, I will introduce the HEROES project. HEROES is the title of the novel strategy to fight child sexual exploitation and human trafficking crimes and protect the victims. The HEROES project is structured in a comprehensive solution that's composed of 3 main pillars: prevention, investigation, and victim assistance. Through these components, our solution aims to establish a coordinated contribution with law enforcement agencies by developing an appropriate victim-centered approach that is capable of addressing specific needs and providing protections. The HEROES project main objective is to use technology to improve the way in which help and support can be provided to victims of trafficking human beings and child sexual abuse and exploitations. Moreover, the HEROES project will establish new innovative strategies that in the short, medium, and long term will provide the way in which the law enforcement agency and the civil society carry out criminal investigations, assist rescued victims, and prevent the occurrence of these crimes. On each HEROES 3 pillars, information and communication technologies are combined with the social science and humanities to develop comprehensive solutions that address all the needs of the main actors in the fight against trafficking human beings and child sexual abuse and exploitation. The solution of proposed HELIO is divided in three pillars. In the first pillars, the preventions, the project will address prevention through a mixed approach of technology and social action. To this end, HEROES will develop an open source application that will help reduce the risk of becoming victims of human trafficking and increase the security with which children communicate through social media networks. These tools will serve two purposes. First, they will raise public awareness about trafficking human beings and child sexual abuse and exploitation. And the second, they will increase participation of different actors in the society in the identification of potential victims and source of trafficking human beings and child sexual abuse and exploitation. The main three objectives in the prevention is to provide a variety of preventive measures to reduce both crimes. The second objective is to reduce the demand of the services that might be provided by victims in both legal and illegal sectors. And the last objective in prevention is to reduce the risk of the reoffending by better understanding of the behavior of abuser and potential abuser. In this pillar, we propose three tools, an anti-grooming mobile app, and also identify fake job offer tool, and one citizen reporting app. Also, we propose some social activities in order to improve the integral prevention programs, and also we develop in two countries, Colombia and Bangladesh, the two prevention campaigns and education. And also we analyze the information exchanges and collaboration about these crimes. In the second pillar, the crime investigations, we propose HEROES projects will develop technological tools that cover the most important needs that the law enforcement agency have: data gathering and analysis, while embracing the very technical, ethical, and legal challenge unique to fighting trafficking human beings and child sexual abuse and exploitation crimes. HEROES will apply problem techniques based on machine learning and deep learning to implement these tools, along with an innovative solution for the implementation of criminal investigation using the investigation agents throughout the internet. The first main objectives in this pillar is to analyze possible involvement of organized crimes groups implicated in trafficking human beings and child sexual abuse and exploitation in other crimes. The second objective is to develop new approach to investigate trafficking human beings and child sexual abuse and exploitation. The third objective is to address the new threats of child abuse and coercion and extortion of victims that have escalated in the last years. And the final objective is to provide to law enforcement agencies with the effective means to detect, investigate, and break down open and hidden peer-to-peer networks and websites. In this pillar, we developed some tools to make forensics analysis, mainly in the multimedia files. In the third pillar, the victim assistance, we also propose some solutions to improve victim assistance regarding victims of these both crimes, trafficking human beings and child sexual abuse. HEROES will develop preventive measures to ensure adequate protection and assistance for these victims by means of implementation of training programs to law enforcement agencies and the multi-stakeholders, practitioners, developing policies and strategies to policy and law market to advise the rights of trafficking human beings and child sexual abuse victims, and developing good practice books and guidelines for law enforcement agencies and the stakeholders, procedures concerning of victim of this both crime. In this sense, we are focusing on training and cooperation between stakeholders that interact with the victims will provide the support provided, especially specialized in assistance, and create a flow between victims and justice systems that does not give rise to secondary victimizations, but rather places the victim and her needs at the central procedures. And we, in this, my colleagues will explain better the other activities developed in this pillar. And finally, the project is composed for our multidisciplinary expertise, and we have a network of partners from 3 different continents: Latin America, and Europe, and also from Asia, one country, Bangladesh. The partners are from 17 different countries, and is composed by 3 universities, 3 research centers, 2 small and medium enterprise, 1 international organizations, 1 governmental organization, and we have the 8 NGOs and 6 law enforcement agencies that are our end users in the project. That is the partners of the consortium: 3 universities, University of Kent, the BUB in Brussels, Universidad Complutense of Madrid in Spain, the 3 research centers as INRIA from French, Kimea is a research center adjunct to the Hellenic Police, Athenas Research Center, both from Greece, and 2 small companies, Idener from Spain and Trilateral Research, the lead of the ethical part of the project. Also, the 1 international organization, ICMPD, that is represented today for my colleagues Madalina and Edgar. And we have 8 NGOs, ICMEC, that is represented by my colleagues Zoe, Global Initiative, that is another partner, Greek Council Refugees from Portugal, CWCS is an NGO from Bangladesh, ASBRAT is an NGO from Brazil, APAP is an NGO from Portugal, Fundación Renacer from Colombia, COPSI from Lithuania, and we have governmental representations from Uruguay, and we have 6 LIAs, law enforcement agencies, Spanish National Police, Bulgarian Police, Latvia Police, Hellenic Police, and 2 police from Brazil, Brazilian Federal Police, and also Policía Rodoviaria. Thank you very much for allow present the project, and if you have any question, we are here to answer.
Thank you very much, Ana Lucila, for this presentation about the HEROES project, and more importantly about how, or within the framework of this multi-year project, what are going to be like the different, not only the different partners, but also what are going to be the different products. And because we are all somehow involved in that, we would like to also highlight that this is going to be something that we're going to, you can find the website. I don't know, Anna, if you want to put in the chat box also the website of Heroes, where you can see also the different products and reports that will be published under, like, in this framework. So as was already put in the chat, please feel free to put any questions or comments that you have. We're very eager to hear also in your country if you have heard of some similar projects. And then we will have, after the presentations and after a second round, we will then also have the opportunity to speak with our participants. I would like now to introduce our second panelist, Madalena Rogos from ICMPD. So Madalena is a researcher at the International Center for Migration and Policy Development, ICMPD, with almost 15 years of experience in conducting research in the field of migration policies. At ICMPD, she has been involved in numerous comparative, collaborative, and multidisciplinary projects in the area of migrant integration, migration data collection, return and fundamental rights of returnees, anti-trafficking policies, care work, mobility, and more recently on migration and security. Currently, she's conducting research on the relevance and the potential of technology in addressing extreme exploitation and coordinates the overall involvement of ICMPD in several Horizon projects, including the Heroes and the FAIR. Madalena holds a bachelor's in political science from the SNSPA in Bucharest and a master's in gender studies from the CEU in Budapest. Madalena, we are very happy to have you here as part of the panel. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Livia, for the warm welcome. And thank you also, Ana Lucila, for such a comprehensive introduction of the project. I will share my screen in a second. And I would like you colleagues to tell me if you see it.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, perfect. So welcome, everyone. My task today, this afternoon, is basically to present some of the findings of the social science research conducted within the Heroes project, more specifically on the gaps and challenges in identification and treatment of victims of child sexual abuse and child sexual exploitation, and trafficking in human being victims, particularly in criminal proceedings. So you would notice that I use the term victims, and I feel that this will require a little disclaimer. So in line with international recommendations, the research we've been conducting within Heroes, colleagues and I, so the research uses consistent terminology, respectively of the legal terms used in specific countries. For instance, child instead of minor for persons under 18, or what, like was mentioned earlier, child sexual abuse material instead of child pornography. With regard to the usage of the term victim or survivor, I would like just to say that both terms, of course, are correct, but there is a distinction, right? So the distinction is how and when they are used. So usually the term survivor is related to the process of recovery, while the term victim is used in legal proceedings and in the cases, and is usually referred to in criminal justice systems, and also reflects the status, the legal status of a person. So that's why in the presentation you will be using this kind of terminology. Now, just a little bit about the structure of the project in terms of social science research. So for the Heroes project, I have been coordinating the social science approach and research in order to provide the background on and operationalize the social and legal context for addressing trafficking in human beings and child sexual abuse and exploitation through the Heroes technical tools. So our approach for the HEROES project includes two main components. First, we developed 3 studies to provide the context in which the HEROES tools will operate. One referred to understanding the various legal frameworks. Another study analyzed what is possible from an ethical and legal perspective when it comes to special investigation techniques online. And finally, another study looked at the relevance of different policy areas, particularly national strategies for responding to missing children. Then the approach was to conduct in-depth research on prevention, investigation, and victim assistance, which are the 3 HEROES components that Ana Lucila presented earlier. And the idea was to develop a set of tools for early identification of potential trafficking and child sexual abuse and child sexual exploitation victims. And my colleague Edgar will touch upon that later in this panel. Another research strand looked at the gaps and challenges with regard to treatment of victims of these crimes in criminal proceedings. And finally, another one looked at prevention programs. And both of these latter types of research, if you wish, looked also at promising practices in this respect, in this particular area. But I would like to focus on some of the results on our in-depth research on the gaps in current practices on treatment of victims during criminal proceedings. So a little bit about the methodology. So these are the research questions that we wanted to find answers to. So first, what are the typical challenges for victims and witnesses in their interaction with various stakeholders during criminal proceedings? What are typical barriers when it comes to cooperating with law enforcement in criminal proceedings? And finally, what are typical practices in criminal proceedings that can be harmful to victims and witnesses? Yeah? We looked both at trafficking in human beings and child sexual abuse and child sexual exploitation that have an online element. A little bit more on the methodology. So we looked at 5 countries, 3 within the EU and 2 non-EU countries. National experts, national researchers and experts in these contexts conducted research in all of these countries by carefully analyzing the legal frameworks, the referral mechanisms, the policies in place, and so on. In addition, we conducted more than 70 semi-structured interviews in these 5 countries, but also at the EU level. We interviewed victim advocating organizations, law enforcement agencies, policy advisors, representatives of the judiciary, academics, independent experts, and so on. But let me turn to the actual findings. When it comes to identification of potential victims of trafficking and also of child sexual abuse and exploitation, perception of national legal systems seems to matter. So people affected or their legal guardians will not come forward because of mistrust in authorities and what is perceived as lengthy criminal proceedings. This has been reported in several countries in different legal systems. Then another interesting challenge, if you wish, when it comes to identification, particularly of child sexual abuse, specifically child sexual abuse material, a challenge that was shared with us by law enforcement agencies is that due to the limited resources of law enforcement agencies to actually conduct a human screening of the data that they have, particularly child sexual abuse material, there is a pre-selection of the data. And this is a triage system as coined by my colleague, Jimmy Perumadan. And what this means is the following. So law enforcement agents have to prioritize the material depicting very young children over children who might have reached the age of sexual consent or age of majority and could pose difficulties due to varying age limits across countries. That would be one thing. So age is important. Secondly, material depicting the most severe forms of exploitation, sexual abuse, are prioritized over material that is not regarded child sexual abuse material or quote-unquote child pornography in various countries, particularly if we talk about a transnational case. And thirdly, more recently produced material will be again selected over older material because it is being considered that newer material depicts a child who might still be in an exploitative situation. So if we address that, there is a chance to actually rescue that child. So these are some of the challenges or some of the limits, if you wish, when it comes to identification. Victims of trafficking in human beings, but particularly victims of child sexual abuse. Now, if we move on briefly to gaps or challenges when it comes to participation in criminal proceedings, we found that victims, even if identified as such, are reluctant to participate and support the criminal proceedings because of mistrust in authorities or fear of reprisals. Again, the length of the criminal proceedings, a burden of proof on the testimony of those affected. Criminal proceedings could be based solely on victims' testimonies. And finally, participation is hindered because of a lack of knowledge when it comes to the judicial process itself and own rights on the part of potential victims or victims that have been already identified. Finally, when it comes to harmful practices or gaps in safeguarding rights throughout the criminal proceedings, these 5 stood out as most recurring. Namely, there is a lack of specialized interpretation services. What this means is that when a victim is a migrant in one of these countries and is not fluent in the language of the country, for instance, there are interpretation services throughout the criminal proceedings, but often these are not specialized to deal with situation of extreme exploitation. So this has been raised by several countries. Furthermore, there is a deficient witness protection, especially during the trial phase. There is a lack of specialized training for medical staff. There are long criminal proceedings, and there is the requirement to give the same testimony at different stages of the process, and this may lead to re-victimization. And finally, there is a lack of specialized training on victim treatment in general in some of the countries that we looked at. And now, basically, if you would take one message from my intervention today, let it be this one. If you look at these findings and you've been around and focused on the anti-trafficking world and policies in the last 10 to 15 years, you will notice that many of these findings are not completely new, right? So particularly when it comes to barriers to participating in criminal proceedings, but also this one's referring to gaps in safeguarding victims' rights in criminal proceedings. So my question to you and what I would like to discuss with you and what I'm currently interested in is where in the anti-trafficking institutional structure and potentially also in the institutional structure that deals with child sexual abuse and child sexual exploitation. So where in this institutional structure one can intervene and with what type of a change so that in 10 years from now we can expect to have a sustainable change for the better. I'm very much interested in a type of change that could contribute in an effect into the entire system, because the things that we've been doing so far in the last 15 years don't seem to have brought to bring substantial change at this point. And if you are interested in continuing the conversation, of course, we can do so in the Q&A session today, but together with other colleagues from the HEROES project, we will have another panel on concrete examples on the challenges and sociological and legal approaches of these issues. And this panel, you have it on the slide, and it will be tomorrow at 11 Central European time. So if you would like to join, please do so. And follow us on social media and visit the HEROES website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madalina, for giving an overview of these gaps and challenges for victims victims still being in the process of being identified as such. And I think what is also important to add here is that, at least what we also have been seeing throughout our research, is that there is also a lack of knowledge from for instance, criminal justice practitioners when it's about the knowledge on how to secure, for instance, tech evidence. And I think that is, or digital evidence, because I think that is also something that is very important in terms of the criminal proceedings. So we have heard of cases, for instance, where families, and because we're talking about the issue of child exploitation, it's related to stigmatization. It has an impact on sometimes on the entire community, not just a family, where family members are asking to remove pictures, the abusive material from cell phones and things like that. And criminal justice practitioners were not enough prepared to also address this. So I think that is a gap and a challenge for other stakeholders other than the victims, but it definitely has an impact on the treatment of the victims. But thanks very much for bringing again to the attention what is necessary in the treatment and for victims of trafficking, and specifically in that case. I'm going to proceed now to our next speaker, and I'm very happy to welcome Zoe from ICMEC. So Zoe is the Heroes and Europe Program Manager at the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the ICMEC, and she manages ICMEC's projects and programs such as the Heroes and the Aluna projects funded by the European Commission, and joining 25 and more organizations to develop solutions for prevention, investigation, and victim assistance for victims and survivors of child sexual abuse and exploitation and trafficking in human beings, or the implementation also of the Amber Alert system in Albania, where she was working with the US Embassy, the Albanian State Police, and other key stakeholders to implement the alert, supporting and the search for missing children. Before joining ICMEC, Zoe was the International Development Officer at the Internet Watch Foundation, the IWF, which is the UK hotline to report child sexual abuse material. She holds a master's degree in Near and Middle Eastern studies from the SOAS University of London, graduating with a distinction and a first-class honors degree in politics and international studies from the University of Warwick in the UK. So thank you very much, Zoe, for joining us today. And the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Thank you so much again for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to join this event. I participated last year as just as a participant, so now being a speaker is really exciting. So thank you so much. So as you said, my name is Zoe Colpart, and I focus on our work in Europe, ICMEC's work in Europe, including obviously the Heroes project, which joins so many partners, and I'm really proud to be part of this panel today to talk a little bit about that project. First of all, very quickly, a few words about ICMEC. So the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children has been created in 1999, and we are headquartered in the US, but we are present in a lot of different countries. For example, I'm based in Portugal, and we work in more than 120 countries to identify gaps in national and international capacities in the prevention, care, and investigation of sexually abused and exploited, trafficked, and missing children. And so we offer support to governments, decision makers, law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, industry, and civil society to reduce those gaps. So I'll take a quick kind of step back. And I know, Olivia, you already mentioned some of that data, but I want to just give again that important background on which the Heroes project is based. Why are we doing everything that we're doing in that 3-year project? So taking very internationally recognized data, obviously NECMEC is a really key stakeholder here to understand a little bit how bad we are, basically how bad the situation is. In 2022, NECMEC received 32 million cyber tip reports, in their hotline, which is an increase from 2021 of 9%, and overall from 2019 of 89%. That means around 32 million reports, which means millions and millions of images and videos, as one report can contain one image or thousands. The second piece of data, again, I want to bring forward is from the Internet Watch Foundation. And again, Livia, you mentioned that data as well, insisting on how offenders are targeting younger and younger children. First of all, again, data is quite similar to NECMEC's data in terms of the increase of reports coming through the helpline, with 375,000 in 2022. And again, showing this decrease of age in terms of victims with 11 to 13-year-olds, this kind of parenthesis of age growing year on year, with an even bigger growth of victims appearing on photos and videos aged between 7 and 10-year-olds. In terms of gender as well, we know that little girls are more likely to be victimized and appearing on photos and videos, but obviously doesn't mean that boys are not victims as well. And it's obviously something really important to think about when we think of those solutions to make sure that every children can be protected from this terrible type of abuse. I also quickly want to mention the ReProtect's annual global threat assessment that was released yesterday. And all the conclusions are really important, and I would really invite all of you to read it. But something that was really shocking, even to me, who's been working in this field for years, conversations with children on social media, especially social gaming platforms, can escalate into high-risk grooming situations within 19 seconds, 19 seconds. This is, to me, this is really crazy. And it's important to discuss and talk about this and make sure that every parent is aware of this, every carer, every adult who has the responsibility over children as professor, teacher, you know, a social worker, etc., to make sure that they are aware of the risks. That was quite a bleak picture of the situation, but we're also here to talk about the solutions, because we as a group, and all of you also participating today, are here because you think that there is something to be done, and there is, definitely there is. We are working on the Heroes project, as you know, and we think that through some of the solutions that we're bringing through that project, we can bring our little play our little part in this big, progress towards making sure that children can use the internet with more safety. So Anna presented the Heroes project very well. I'm just very quickly going to run through the 3 pillars again from a slightly different perspective, and also then go a little bit deeper into 2 of those pillars. So again, Heroes focuses on 3 pillars: prevention, investigation, and victim assistance. In terms of prevention, we are working together on research, especially when it comes to, for example, indicators on THB and CSEA that Madalena and Edgar have mentioned and will mention. Also working on prevention campaigns and programs, as well as tools and technology for the general public. So again, linking that research and awareness raising with tools to make sure that we have a whole, all-encompassing response to that kind of abuse. In terms of investigation, the Heroes project is creating a suite of technological tools and management programs for law enforcement specifically. So in terms of investigation, including undercover investigation, detection, analysis, and classification of different types of crimes and proofs of abuse, such as child sexual abuse material, etc. And the final pillar is victim assistance, which again brings together research and measures on protection and assistance, as well as proposes new approaches to mitigate the impact of trafficking in human beings and child sexual abuse and exploitation, and reduce re-victimization. So as I mentioned, I'm going to focus on 2 pillars today: prevention and victim assistance. And I just want to a little bit more concretely explain what we're doing to actually bring solutions and ensure that prevention is strengthened, as well as victim assistance. So regarding prevention of child sexual abuse and exploitation and trafficking, in terms of research, which is, as Madalena explained, is the basis of all the other activities and initiatives that we're taking. We're looking at social, psychological, and economic factors to identify potential THB and CACA victims, which Madalena mentioned, as well as a study on prevention programs to identify the barriers of their implementation, to understand a little bit better what is being done in different countries, what works and what doesn't, and as a result, propose recommendations to make them even better. We're also looking at a mapping prisoner re-entry to understand, again, from the offender's perspective, how can we prevent further reoffending? Regarding awareness, Anna mentioned the campaigns that we're leading in this Heroes project. First, one thing that ICMEC is developing is a guide, which is called Connected Kids, a comprehensive guide to ensuring online safety and well-being, which is for any adult who has a responsibility towards children and a duty of care to make sure that they have an understanding of the risks of online environments, but also a reassurance that there is something they can do. And also, if there is a problem, what do they do? After having those conversations with the children, how can they ensure that the children can feel like they can go talk to them if there's anything wrong? And then how do they manage that? The second campaign, which Anna mentioned, is the Red Heart campaign to promote child rights in Bangladesh. So our partners in Bangladesh are working with pretty much the entire civil society in the country, as well as policymakers and law enforcement, to share those best practices and awareness raising resources that are really, really important. And finally, from our partners in Colombia, Juntos Cambiemos el Rumbo de la Historia, apologies for my accent, which is a campaign that is Together, Let's Change the Course of History, which is specifically targeting trafficking human beings and child sexual exploitation in the context of travel and tourism, which is an issue in Colombia. And our partners are working with airport companies, airport themselves, and a lot of transport, the transport field in the country, to make sure that they are aware that this is an issue, and also to bring solutions to them as practitioners in the field. How can they prevent that type of abuse from happening in their planes, in their airports, etc. And finally, technology, which our technological partners are developing. The first that focuses again on prevention is a citizen reporting app, where an individual can report something that they see and they fear is a form of abuse or trafficking, and that report goes to the police, just to streamline that process. The second is the anti-grooming mobile app, which our university in Madrid, our partners at the University of Madrid are developing, which is an app that is built both on the child's phone with their consent and the adult's phone, which pings basically when there is an attempt at grooming the child. And then the parent receives that notification to really stop that process from continuing further and encourage those conversations between the parent and the child, and understand, what went wrong, who is that person that you're talking to, what can you do to make sure that this doesn't happen again, etc. And finally, the indoor tool, which Anna also mentioned, which will help practitioners in the field recognize if a job offer is fair or if it's fake, and so that if that job offer could lead to trafficking. This is specifically for NGOs to support their clients and the people they help to prevent trafficking. And the final kind of examples of what we are doing in the Heroes project that I want to talk about is focusing on assistance to victims and survivors of child sexual abuse and exploitation and trafficking. And again, research, is really the cornerstone of that project, making sure that everything is based on data and on facts. So we're looking at different aspects, and again, with ICMPD leading many of them. The first one is researching the harmonization of trafficking human beings and CSCA legal frameworks. Again, understanding what works, what doesn't, and what could be bettered. Also looking at harmful practices and remedies on treatment during criminal proceedings, which Madalena mentioned. LEA strategies to respond to missing children cases. again, this same idea of understanding what is being done, what works, what doesn't work, and so then providing recommendations to make the process work better, especially looking at missing children cases, because we know way too well how much missing children, child sexual abuse and exploitation and trafficking are interlinked. And finally, analysis of trauma bonding impact on trafficking and child sexual abuse and exploitation victims to understand how this trauma bond impact judicial proceedings and impact the reporting process and the talking against the abuser, etc., etc. In terms of, again, assistance to victims, we are also looking at a lot of capacity building initiatives. The first one is a framework for a multidisciplinary team protocol on the response to CSE and THB, which is a protocol to be tailored by the country or the institution that will use it in order for them to either create or strengthen their multidisciplinary team to better respond to victims of child sexual abuse and exploitation and trafficking. And finally, based on the research on trauma bonding, a protocol to, again, try and identify victims who have this trauma bond and help them go through the proceedings in a way that is not re-victimizing. And finally, training, and I know I'm running out of time, so I'll be very quick. There's one training that we're developing specifically for passenger transport personnel to, again, identify victims and have the confidence to report. Another training on recognizing, intervening, and preventing various forms of sexual violence, which is basically a catalog of all the trainings that ICMEC offers and that other partners offer within the HEROES project and beyond. And finally, a training related to the framework on multidisciplinary teams to help practitioners action on that protocol and set up those multidisciplinary teams. Thank you so much. Sorry for the time, and I'll be delighted to respond to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zoe, for going a little bit more into the details of HEROES. HEROES is such a complex and multi-layered program that has so many moving elements and parts that I feel it's very important to unpack this also by the different pillars. And I do have one question that is related to that, but I leave it for the second round of quick, like flashlight, the second round that we're going to have. Just one query, Zoe, if you could put in the chat box the report, the We Protect report that you just mentioned that once was launched yesterday. Thank you very much. I'm going to come now to our last speaker, to Edgar. Very great to also have you here on the panel. And Edgar Federsoni has been dedicating his efforts to combat human trafficking for over a decade. So he currently served as the project manager at the Anti-Human Trafficking Program of the International Center for Migration Policy Development, the ICMPD in Vienna, Austria. Edgar has partnered with other international organizations and national institutions to implement projects in over 20 countries across diverse regions, such as South America, Europe, West Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia. His work has covered all relevant areas involving trafficking, like research, capacity building, and policy and legal development, as well as their implementation on the ground. His specific focus has been in the development of mechanisms to protect actual victims and people vulnerable to exploitation. That has included institutional and policy building, facilitation of national strategies and action plans, standard operation procedures for national and transnational referral mechanisms, and practical guidelines to harmonize stakeholders' practices. Edgar is a Brazilian national and holds a bachelor's in international relations from the University of the State of Sao Paulo in Brazil, and a master's in global studies from the University of Leipzig, Germany, and the University of Vienna, Austria. We're very pleased to have you here in the panel. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know where you are located at the moment, based at the moment, but very, very happy to be here with all of you and to share my 50 cents with you. I'll try and share my screen. Please let me know if you can see it properly in 1 second. Here we go. Can you see it? Okay, very good. So we have a very limited amount of time, and I decided to narrow down my presentation a little bit. So I would like to talk to you today about online facilitated child sexual exploitation, because we have a very recent publication. It's not public yet, but it's finalized. We delivered it in January this year. And so we have very fresh data and very fresh, let's say, lessons learned from this publication. I will focus on this one so we can see what is happening nowadays and what we have learned from it. So the name of this publication is a manual for early identification of potential victims of trafficking in human beings, child sexual abuse, and child sexual exploitation. So as you can see today, I'm going to talk only about the third pillar of child sexual exploitation. And I'll tell you some of the findings that we have from there. For my presentation, I will first give you a general overview of the manual. And then I will talk a little bit, very, very briefly about the online facilitated child sexual exploitation. And then I'll give you 3 case studies that we applied in our manual. So basically the manual, it's not a research piece. This is a practical tool. So yes, we ran research because it's very important for us to develop anything based on evidence. And we ran a very big effort, international effort with partners, some of whom are here with us today. So we have UCM, for example, we have Trilateral, ourselves ICMPD, Renacer in Colombia, and also CWCS in Bangladesh. And you also had reviewers in Greece and Unikent. And this manual, delivered now in January, is for law enforcement, for labor inspectors, for police, for anyone really, and also NGOs and social workers, anyone who could come into contact with a possible victim of trafficking or exploited child in general. And it contains an overview of concepts and case studies, but also specifically, it contains very specific sector tailored indicators so that practitioners in all countries can use those indicators to detect a case of trafficking and exploitation. So as I said, the aim here is stage B and child sexual exploitation and abuse in a target group. Here we have law enforcement agents, labor inspectors, non-government organizations, health and educational professionals in general. I already mentioned this. And the manual is structured in 2 main parts. The first part is a general review internationally of the concepts that we're talking about. So the concepts and good practices and indicators available already at international level for THP and child sexual exploitation. And some practices that other international organizations or countries use in detecting cases of exploitation. And then in the second part, to be more specific, we have identified very critical sectors in 4 countries: Bangladesh, Colombia, Spain, and United Kingdom. And we studied that very, very in details to understand how it works, the models of operandi and everything, and how to detect exploitation in those specific contexts. That can also be utilized in other countries because these sectors are sectors that usually have a high incidence of trafficking and exploitation anyway worldwide. Here I have just the sectors that we have selected. Some countries have 2, have THB and child sexual exploitation, and some countries have only one or the other. I'm not going to read all the text that I have in my slides here because it's too much text. But then soon enough, you will have the manual being publicly available, and then you can get all this information in detail. So it's important to say that these indicators that we are developing here, they are for frontline officers responsible and for everyone who comes in contact, but it's not a way to provide proof or conclusive decision whether a case of THP or exploitation is happening. Is just a screening process. It's also a triage process, the way of raising a possible concern and then refer it to the next stage and maybe refer it to to, for example, the police for investigation and other competent authorities. So here we have also list of common characteristics found in THB and CSE in all these countries and all the sectors, and then we have the specifics, and they're supposed to help everyone. And as I said, the third pillar of these indicators is online facilitated child sexual exploitation. And here just brought a very, very short overview of what we have learned from recent data. So we've learned that during COVID, of course, because people were forced to use more online tools for their studies, for their work, for shopping, for eating. So people are forced to be online and also to put their information there and to be just more present. And therefore, the criminals also use this opportunity to also recruit more children online. And since the easing of most of the COVID restrictions worldwide, we saw, of course, people were utilizing less of these online tools than they were in those years, but still the amount of harmful data, information, and materials online is still very, very high. So once this threshold has been put up here of harmful content, you won't go down anymore. So basically, even after we're not forced in many ways to use those online tools, the harmful content has been created and is available and is exploited. So, and this is basically almost everywhere in the world. As an example here, I brought you some results from a study that Interpol and ECPAT International reported. They have an international database of imagery and online materials, and they got one portion of it and they studied it to see what's happening there. So they found that the younger the victim, the more severe the abuse. They found that 84% of the child sexual exploitation material images contained explicit sexual activity. More than 60% of unidentified victims were prepubescent, including infants and toddlers. 65% of unidentified victims were girls. Severe abuse images were likely to feature boys, and 92% of visible offenders were men. Beyond the traditional, let's say, methods of XM that we already know, we all heard about, in our studies, in our research, we found also new methods that are becoming very, very prevalent nowadays. So live streaming of child sexual exploitation abuse. So it's not only videos and photos that are just put there for consumption, but also live streaming of the act itself as it happens. Online solicitation for the purpose of sexual relations, online solicitation for the purpose of sexual extortion, a lot of sextortion happening, and a lot of peer-to-peer networks and anonymized access like darknet networks. So the darknet networks for this type of crime really has skyrocketed in this period. Of course, there's a non-exhaustive list, as I said, of current practices, and new methods are just created every day, basically. So this is just an example. And now I'm going to show you the results, some of the findings that we have from the case studies that we looked into. So in Bangladesh, for example, we found that, this is also a report from UNICEF, 32% of the children aged between 10 and 17 are online. And these are in danger, posed by online violence, cyberbullying, and digital harassment. And by using mobile phones and the internet, the face-to-face contact is no more necessary to recruit sex workers or maintain clients. This has made forced sexual exploitation less visible and children more vulnerable to it. So 3 of the main findings in Bangladesh were that child sexual exploitation can start when children are as young as 10 in Bangladesh. And they happen in brothels, in hotels, and even public parks, streets, and stations. So it's all very public, it's all very open. It's not as hidden as we would believe it is. Second thing, sexual exploitation of boys is very prevalent, but hidden. It's not so much talked about as for girls, which means that there are many more cases, many more cases than we can even believe. And also the Rohingya girls have been especially vulnerable and exploited for sex trafficking in Bangladesh, and transnationally as well, to India, Malaysia, and Nepal, and they are recruited usually from the refugee camps, which is even more serious. In Spain, for example, we found that 80% of the victims are girls, according to a report by ECPAT. Offenders frequently employ methodological approaches, and which they can repeat and multiply. So they have really structured ways of doing this. It's not just attempts. They're not amateurs. They're really professionals in this. Sexting is becoming more socially acceptable among people in Spain, and it provides perpetrators with a new way to gather sexually harmful material for eventual commercialization or extortion. Exploiters choose their victims mostly from social media and games websites, as was mentioned already by Zoe. And there's a clear trend of online SEM depicting very young children, newborns, and children around the age of 2. And this is growing by the day as much as we could measure, of course. And the fourth case that I brought here, and the findings that we have, is a very interesting case because it's something that we don't know much about, or most of us haven't even heard of it. It's the phenomenon of county lines, and then cuckooing within county lines, and then trafficking within cuckooing within county lines. It's very hidden in a sense because it's layer upon layer upon layer. So in UK, they have this phenomenon, the authorities spotted this phenomenon called county lines, which is basically a hotline for buying drugs. And within this context, these drug dealers, they are adopting this method now of evicting people, especially in the countryside, from their houses and using those houses. And they do this with violence or because these people have debts with them or any other type of method. And they use houses as basis for their operations. And of course, the house is legitimately rented, you know, like there is contract and everything. So there's no reason to believe there's something illegal is happening there. And so this is called cuckooing inside the county lines operations. And for this to happen, they usually recruit children to transport and carry and sell drugs in the cities. So when somebody buys drugs through those lines, those children go and distribute the drugs. And of course, child sexual exploitation is not the only type of exploitation that happens, also for petty crime and for this type of crimes that decided for committing all the types of crimes. And this happens so children are recruited through social media. They use blackmail to coerce them. They might film children being sexually abused, beaten, or humiliated by gang members. Sexual offenses and rape are used to control both boys and girls. Gang members will then threaten their victims to upload the footage to Snapchat or TikTok, or to share it with the families. Gangs are using tracking devices through phone apps and such as Find My Friends to monitor the movements of the children who are transporting and selling drugs for them in cities. And they might also require the children to consistently live stream themselves on WhatsApp or FaceTime while they're on the move, selling and distributing drugs. So this is happening right now, and authorities in the UK are really investing a lot to counteract this fact, this phenomenon. But they're still seeing more and more. I extrapolated my time as well, so thank you very much, and I'll be open and really very happy to have your questions.
Thank you very much, Edgar, for your presentation, and again shedding a light on like the horrendous details of child exploitation, child sexual exploitation online, and also how this is being now also about the interconnectedness with other forms of crime. So we're talking here about organized crime, like these groups that are organizing this. We're not talking only about individuals, but also organized crime groups managing this. We are now almost at the finish of our session. We have 6 minutes left. So that's why I want to open the floor for questions now. I would ask participants if you want to raise your hand, if you want to pose your question directly to one of our speakers, or you can put it in the chat box as my colleague was putting earlier, just to give you the opportunity to also engage. and share your comments and observations, perhaps from your countries or from your projects. I'm just looking if there are any questions or any hands. I don't see there is one question. So one participant is asking if we have any partners. So I guess this is for the Heroes program. If there are any partners in Mexico and or engagement in Mexico. I don't know who wants to, if Ana Lucila or Madalena or Zoe.
Yes, Nina, we don't have partner in Mexico. We have partner in Latin America, four partners, 2 LIAs and 3 NGOs, 2 NGOs and 1 governmental organization. And also in Asia, we have 1 partner. The remaining partner is from here, Europe.
So at the moment, we're having no partners in Mexico, but in case that there is an interest from Mexican partners, there are going to be products from Heroes that are going to be publicly available. So that means any interested organization or any other stakeholder is absolutely welcome to also use that. Zoe?
Okay, if I can just add here, a lot of the products that we're developing in Heroes, especially campaigns and training, we are looking to translate them, including in Spanish. So we are really hoping that, you know, a very wide range of stakeholders can take advantage and use them in their work and, you know, share them onwards.
Actually, that leads me to the next question that I was about to ask you, Zoe, when you were presenting about the guidelines and the tools. This is going to be, from my understanding, this is going to be available on the website, right?
Yes, absolutely. So all of the deliverables that Heroes is creating will be available on the Heroes website or linked through the Heroes website. So a lot of the results will be hosted on partners' website, but linked through to the Heroes website. We have also newsletters to keep track of progress. So maybe Anna, if you want to add, you know, the link of where we can register to the newsletter, all the, you know, the activities that are finished and ready to be used by the general public will be mentioned there as well.
Thanks very much, Zoe. There was one question from a participant that he or she is interested in working in an organization. I would ask our panelists if it's okay for you to put in there some emails or the website addresses of the organization so that this person can reach out to the websites or to the email addresses. Another participant is interested, Jimmy, is interested if the findings from Bangladesh, if they focus on child sexual exploitation overall, or did they focus on online child sexual exploitation only? We have 2 minutes left just for you to know when answering the question.
Sure, no, it's not only, it's not specific, they focus in general. So you'll find information that is beyond is what I get shared.
Good. Thanks very much, Edgar, for being very concise and quick. Yeah, you can see here in the chat box now our email addresses. I'm also going to put our email address there or our website there. What I would like to say is thank you very much to all the participants. Thank you very much, especially to the speakers for presenting and unpacking this very interesting and complex program, Heroes. We are very much looking forward to seeing more of these projects. So please also visit our website of the Heroes. Thank you very much for joining us. There are many more sessions and panels on this OC24. So please also, if Sarah can also put the link here, you can find out more in the agenda of our website, oc24.net. Thank you very much. And we're closing on time. Have a good rest of the day or a good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.